The dead of night weighed on apartment 304 like a damp blanket. Clara woke up without knowing why. That abrupt kind of awakening, her heart already racing before she even opened her eyes. The digital clock read 3:47 a.m. The silence was absolute, until it wasn't. A whisper, low, almost imperceptible, coming from the wall beside the bed. She turned slowly, the cold sheets clinging to her sweaty skin. The sound continued, not words, but a continuous murmur, like someone praying or counting something. Clara swallowed hard. It had to be the neighbor. It had to be. But the apartment next door had been vacant for months. Against all logic, she moved closer. Her fingers touched the cold wall, and then, slowly, she pressed her ear against the slightly peeling wallpaper. The whisper stopped, and then she heard it. A breath. Slow, deep. From the other side of the wall. So close it seemed to be right where her own face was touching. Clara recoiled, stumbling back onto the bed. The breath continued, and then, with a clarity that made her stomach churn, she heard something else. The sound of nails scratching the wall. From the inside, but that was only the beginning. To understand how Clara arrived at that night, we need to go back 3 weeks. Back to the day she signed the lease on the cheapest apartment she had ever seen, and to the moment she met Harold Brennan, the superintendent who always seemed to be in the right place at the right time. The ASHMONT Building had the signature scent of places that have seen too many stories. Mold disguised by cheap disinfectant, old wood, and something else. Something damp and organic that Clara couldn't identify. 7 floors of compact apartments, narrow hallways with worn-out carpeting, and a yellowish light that flickered whenever someone used the elevator. It was perfect, or rather, it was what she could afford. After 6 months of sleeping on her sister's couch, trying to rebuild her life after finally finding the courage to leave Marcus, Clara couldn't be picky. Marcus had been hard to leave behind, not for the right reasons. He had a gift for making any of her decisions seem like a mistake, any achievement seem insignificant. When she finally got out, she felt as if she had torn out a fishhook that had been embedded too deep for too long. The ASHMONT was a new beginning. It was silence. It was hers. On moving day, Harold appeared before she even buzzed the front door. A man in his 50s, thin but not frail, with a common face you'd forget in seconds, except for his eyes. They had a peculiar attentiveness, as if they were always recording every detail. "You must be Miss Vance," he said, and it wasn't a question. "Apartment 304. I've already unlocked it for you." "Oh, thank you," she replied. "You are Harold Brennan," he introduced himself. "Superintendent, handyman, informal manager. If you need anything at all, just call me. I left my number on the fridge." She found that odd. Why on the fridge? But thanked him. Harold carried 2 boxes up the stairs without being asked, refusing a tip with a discreet smile. When he finally left, Clara realized she hadn't heard his footsteps going back down. The apartment was small but functional. An integrated living room and kitchen, a bedroom with a built-in closet, and a bathroom with tiles that had once been white. The walls had a strange, uneven texture, as if they had been patched up over and over. Layers upon layers of paint and plaster. Clara ran a hand over one and felt small ripples, poorly concealed cracks. "For this price, I can't complain," she murmured to herself. In the first few days, Clara established a routine. Remote work from 9 to 6, a run in the park at 7, a quick dinner, and TV shows until she fell asleep. The building was silent, too quiet really. She saw few neighbors. Mrs. Kim from 302, who never made eye contact. The young couple from 405, who always took the stairs in silence. Mr. Brenner from 601, an overweight man who sweated as he walked and whom Harold had mentioned was in poor health. Harold, on the other hand, was always present, fixing the hallway light, changing the furnace filter, sweeping the lobby, always polite, always available, always with that knack for showing up exactly when you thought of him. "Everything all right with the apartment?" he would ask. "Not too cold at night? The walls here are old, but they're thick. They keep everything insulated." She would thank him, but she began to notice. Harold knew when she arrived, when she left, when she forgot to lock her mailbox. And always, he was there to help. Clara's routine quickly solidified. She'd wake at 7:30, Make coffee, always the same amount, exactly 2 cups, and sit on the small second-hand sofa she'd bought to open her laptop for work. She was a data analyst for a digital marketing firm, the kind of job that allowed for solitude, that required no physical presence, that let her be invisible. After Marcus, invisible felt safe. Video calls were rare, and when they happened, she chose the angle carefully. Just her face, nothing of the apartment, not out of shame, but for a reason she couldn't name, as if showing where she lived would reveal too much, as if the walls held secrets that shouldn't be seen. During the day, the ASHMONT was a different place. The faint sunlight streamed through the narrow hallway windows, creating patterns in the suspended dust. Clara would occasionally hear doors opening and closing, hurried footsteps of people leaving for work or returning from an errand. But she rarely saw the people themselves. It was as if all the residents had a silent agreement not to interact, not to get to know each other too deeply. Except for Harold. He was always there, no matter the time. One morning, Clara went down to get her mail at 6:30. She'd woken up early, insomnia, and he was already in the lobby, polishing the staircase railing with a yellowed cloth. "Good morning, Miss Vance," he greeted her. "Up early today?" She nodded, surprised. "You too. I live in the building," he explained, as if that explained everything. "Super's apartment in the basement makes the job easier. I'm always available, always available, always present." Clara figured it was just dedication to his job. After all, the building was always clean, and problems were always fixed quickly. Harold was good at what he did. Clara collected her bills, all in her name, newly updated address, and headed back up. But as she waited for the elevator, she felt it. That sensation of being watched. She turned. Harold was standing in the middle of the lobby, the cloth still in his hand, looking at her. Not in a threatening way, but with an attention that seemed to study her. When he realized she'd noticed, he smiled and went back to his work. Clara stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 3rd floor. The doors began to close, but just before they sealed shut, she saw it. Harold had turned again, and he was staring directly at the elevator, still smiling. The first time something went missing was in the 2nd week. Clara had gone to the grocery store after work, a Friday ritual that helped mark the passage of time. She bought ingredients for lasagna, tomatoes, mozzarella cheese, ground beef, fresh basil. It was a recipe her grandmother used to make, one of the few good childhood memories Marcus had never managed to taint. She got home at 7:30 p.m. and put everything away carefully in the fridge, tomatoes in the crisper, meat on the bottom shelf, cheese in the door. She took a shower, watched 2 episodes of a true crime documentary, and went to bed. The next morning, Saturday, Clara woke up excited. She was going to cook, to make something with her hands, to create. She opened the refrigerator. The cheese was gone. She blinked, confused. She checked the refrigerator door twice. She looked on the shelves, thinking she might have put it in the wrong place. Nothing. She checked the freezer, the cupboards, even the trash, thinking she might have thrown it out in a moment of distraction. The cheese simply wasn't there. Clara stood in the kitchen, her stomach tight with a strange feeling. She clearly remembered putting it there. She remembered the weight of the package, the crinkle of the plastic as she fitted into the fridge door, but there was no sign of it. "I'm losing my mind," she muttered, laughing humorlessly. "This apartment is driving me crazy." She dismissed the incident as fatigue, too much work, her mind still processing the trauma of 6 years with Marcus. Maybe she'd forgotten to buy the cheese. Maybe she'd imagined it. But the following Tuesday, it was the butter. And on Friday, half a loaf of whole wheat bread that she was sure, absolutely sure, she had left on the counter before going to bed. Clara started paying closer attention. She began taking pictures of the fridge before bed, a visual record of what was there. And that's how she realized. Things didn't disappear during the day. They disappeared at night. Between the time she went to sleep and the time she woke up, someone was entering her apartment while she slept. The idea was impossible, absurd. She locked the door every night, checked it 2, sometimes 3 times. She slid the chain lock. The windows were locked. There was no way for anyone to get in, but the food kept vanishing. Clara started sleeping poorly. She would wake up in the middle of the night with her heart pounding, for no apparent reason. She'd get up, check the door, always locked. Check the windows, always locked. Look around the apartment, always empty. Then she'd go back to bed, but she couldn't sleep deeply. She'd linger in a state of semi-consciousness, where every noise, the heater kicking on, The building settling, a car passing on the street, made her jump. It was in the third week that the door happened. Clara had developed an obsessive pre-sleep ritual. She checked all the windows, locked the apartment door with the key, slid the chain lock. She pushed a chair against the door, an extra precaution Marcus would have called paranoia, but which made her feel a little safer. Only then would she go to her room, leaving the door ajar so she could see the apartment's hallway. On Wednesday morning, Clara woke up at 6 a.m. to her phone's alarm. She got up, rubbed her eyes, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. She walked past the front door and stopped. The chair was in place, the chain was engaged, but the door was unlocked. Not just unlocked, ajar, a crack of maybe 2 inches. Cold air from the hallway seeping through the opening. Clara's blood ran cold. She stood there, barefoot on the cold floor, staring at that impossible crack. How could the door be open if the chain was still on? It was physically impossible. To open the door, someone would have had to unlock it from the inside. But to get inside, they would have had to enter first. Her hands trembled as she closed the door and locked it again. She checked the entire apartment, closets, under the bed, the shower, even the narrow space behind the fridge. Nothing. She was alone. But her certainty began to crack, like thin ice under pressure. She wasn't alone. She never had been. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat in the living room with all the lights on, a kitchen knife in her lap, watching the door. At 2:34 a.m., her eyes were burning, her head heavy. She blinked, just for a second, maybe 2. When she opened her eyes, the knife had fallen to the floor, and the hallway light had gone out. Clara stood up slowly, her heart thundering in her chest. The living room light was still on, but the hallway between the living room and the bedroom was plunged into darkness. She hadn't turned it off. She was sure of it. She reached out, fumbling along the wall until she found the switch. She flipped it on. The light flickered twice, hesitant, before fully illuminating. The hallway was empty, but something was different. Clara couldn't tell what it was at first, just a feeling, a subtle misalignment. Then she realized the bedroom door, which she had left ajar, was completely closed. She hadn't closed the door. Clara stood frozen, her hand still on the switch, deciding. She could go back to the living room. She could leave the apartment, go downstairs, call for help. She could do a lot of things. But instead, she took 3 steps to the bedroom door and threw it open. Empty. Bed untouched. Window closed. Closet as she had left it. But the smell. There was a smell that hadn't been there before. Not strong, just perceptible. Cheap soap and something else. Sweat. Human. Someone had been in here. Clara grabbed her phone and did something she should have done days ago. She took pictures. She photographed the door left ajar in the morning. She photographed the missing food. She began to document every strangeness, every inconsistency. If something was happening, something real, not imagined, she needed proof. Proof that couldn't be dismissed as paranoia or exhaustion. In the following days, Clara installed a motion detecting app on her phone that would record automatically. She positioned the phone at strategic angles before going to sleep. If someone was getting in, she would catch them. But the recordings only showed an empty apartment, hours of footage, and nothing. No movement, no shadows. It was as if whoever was doing this knew exactly where the cameras were. It was then that Clara started to notice something more disturbing. Small changes. Objects moved by millimeters. A chair at a slightly different angle. A mug she was sure she'd left on the left side of the sink, now on the right. The remote control flipped over. Buttons down when she always left it, buttons up. Things too small to be certain about, big enough to sow doubt. Marcus had always done that. Moved her things, denied it, made her question her own memory. When she complained, he'd say she was stressed, that she needed to rest, that she was seeing problems where none existed, but this was different. It had to be. Clara began to set traps. A strand of hair stretched across the closet door. If someone opened it, the hair would fall. A grain of rice balanced on the doorknob. Any touch would dislodge it. Techniques she'd seen in spy movies that seemed ridiculous in real life, until they worked. On Thursday, the strand of hair was on the floor. The closet door had been opened during the night. Clara checked her phone's recording. Nothing. Just darkness and silence. But someone had been inside. The evidence didn't lie. She went to the lobby that morning. Harold was there, as always, sorting mail. "Mr. Brennan," Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need to talk to you about something strange that's been happening." Harold looked up, his expression genuinely concerned. Of course, Miss Vance. What's wrong? Things have been going missing from my apartment, and I think someone is coming in while I sleep. Harold frowned. That's very serious. Have you been locking your door? Always, and I check it several times. And the windows? Locked too. Harold scratched his chin thoughtfully. You know, the building is old. Sometimes the locks act up. And as for the missing items, are you sure? Sometimes when we're tired, memory plays tricks on us. Clara felt her frustration rising. I have pictures. I have proof. Can you show me? She took out her phone, opened the gallery. Pictures of the fridge with the cheese. Pictures of the fridge without the cheese. Pictures of the closet with her traps. Harold looked at them intently. I understand your concern, he said after a moment. But Miss Vance, no offense. These photos don't prove someone broke in. They just show that, well, that maybe you forgot to buy something or you moved things without realizing. It happens to all of us. I didn't forget, Clara insisted. Of course, Harold soothed. But here's what I'll do. I will personally check the security of your apartment. Locks, windows, everything. And I'll ask the night shift guy to be more vigilant. Mr. Garrett, do you know him? He works security at the hospital but lives here on the second floor. He might have seen something. Clara didn't know any Mr. Garrett, but she nodded. Thank you. Not at all. It's my job to keep everyone safe here, Harold said, smiling warmly. And Miss Vance, if you're feeling unsafe, I might recommend talking to someone, a therapist, moving to a new apartment, the end of a relationship. All of that can affect our mental state in ways we don't realize. Clara left the lobby feeling worse than before. Harold had been kind, helpful, but he had basically suggested she was imagining things, just like Marcus used to. But she wasn't imagining it. Was she? That night, Clara made a decision. She wasn't going to sleep. She was going to stay up all night, watching. If something happened, she would see it, with her own eyes. She made strong coffee. She positioned herself in the living room with a clear view of the door and the hallway, and she waited. Midnight passed, then 1 in the morning, 2. Exhaustion pulled at her eyelids, but she resisted. She pinched her arm when she felt her eyes closing. She got up and did jumping jacks. Anything to stay awake. At 3:15 a.m., she heard it, not from inside the apartment, from outside, in the hallway. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, stopping right in front of her door. Clara froze, her heart hammering. The footsteps stopped. Silence. And then, the sound of something being inserted into the lock. Metal scraping against metal. Someone was trying to get in. Clara got up slowly, phone in hand, and started recording. She approached the door silently, barefoot on the cold floor. She looked through the peephole. The hallway was dark, but she could make out a shape, a silhouette. Someone crouched in front of the door, working on the lock. "Who's there?" Clara shouted, her voice stronger than she felt. The figure froze. For a second, Clara thought she would see their face, that she would finally know who was tormenting her. But then the person shot up and ran, hurried footsteps retreating, clattering down the stairs. Clara unlocked the door, yanked it open, and stepped into the hallway. Empty. Whoever it was had vanished. But on the floor, in front of her door, was something. A tool. A makeshift lockpick made of wire. Proof. Finally, physical proof that she wasn't imagining it. Clara picked up the tool carefully, using the hem of her pajama pants to avoid leaving fingerprints. She went back into the apartment, locked the door, and for the first time in weeks, felt a spark of validation. She wasn't crazy. Someone really was trying to get in. The question was, who and why? And more importantly, now that they'd been discovered, what would they do next? The next morning, Clara went straight to the police station. She brought the lockpick, the photos, the recordings, everything she had documented over the past weeks. A detective, Thompson, met her in a small room that smelled of stale coffee and old paper. "So, Miss Vance," he said, looking at his notes, "you believe someone is entering your apartment. Tell me everything from the beginning." Clara told him, every detail. The missing food, the open door, the moved objects, the figure in the hallway. She showed him the evidence. Thompson listened attentively, asking occasional questions, taking notes. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. We have a lockpick, which could have been dropped by anyone at any time. We have photos of your fridge in different states, which doesn't prove a break-in, and a figure you saw for 2 seconds in a dark hallway but couldn't identify." "But someone tried to pick my lock," Clara insisted. "I saw them." "I believe you saw someone," Thompson said. "But that could have been a drunk neighbor who got the wrong door." It could have been someone trying to burgle the building. Without a face, without an ID, I don't have much to work with. So what do I do? Clara asked, frustration bleeding into her voice. First, change your locks. Immediately. Second, consider installing a real security camera in your apartment, not just your phone. Third, and don't take this the wrong way, but consider talking to a mental health professional. What you've described, insomnia, paranoia, a feeling of being watched, are common symptoms of post-traumatic anxiety. You mentioned you recently left a difficult relationship. Clara felt her cheeks burn. Yes, but that has nothing to... It might have more to do with it than you think, Thompson interrupted gently. Look, I'll send a patrol car to drive by your building more often. I'll file your report, but without more concrete evidence, that's the best I can do right now. Clara left the station feeling defeated. No one believed her. Everyone thought she was going crazy. Even she was starting to doubt herself. But then the sounds began. That same night, Clara had new locks installed. She spent money she didn't have, but the feeling of security was worth it. She also bought a real security camera, one with night vision and motion detection, and aimed it at the front door. She felt prepared, protected, finally a step ahead. But she wasn't, because whatever was happening at the ASHMONT wasn't coming from outside the apartment. It was coming from inside the walls. At 2:17 a.m., Clara woke to a sound. Not the door, not the window. A dragging, subtle, coming from the wall between her bedroom and apartment 305. She sat up in bed, listening intently. The sound continued. Drag, pause, drag, pause, like something heavy being pulled through a narrow space. Clara got up and approached the wall. She pressed her ear to the cold surface, and she heard it. Footsteps. Inside the wall. Not above, not below. Inside. Clearly human footsteps, but muffled, as if someone were walking down a hallway that shouldn't exist. The footsteps started near the head of her bed, then moved along the length of the wall until they reached the corner of the room, and then they stopped. Clara stood motionless, barely breathing, and then she felt it. A vibration, faint, but real. As if someone were breathing on the other side, their entire body pressed against the same wall where her ear rested. She backed away, her heart racing. She grabbed her phone and started recording audio. If she was hearing something, she needed evidence. Evidence no one could dismiss. The sounds continued every night after that, always between 2 and 4 a.m., always in the walls. Sometimes it was footsteps. Other times, voices, unintelligible whispers, like a conversation happening in another dimension, filtered through layers of concrete. Clara recorded it all, hours of audio, and when she listened to it during the day, with sunlight streaming through the window and the normal world around her, she couldn't deny it. There were voices, multiple voices, talking, whispering. She tried to rationalize it. She researched the acoustics of old buildings, how sound travels through ventilation ducts. Maybe it was conversations from other apartments, distorted as they echoed through the walls, but it didn't explain the footsteps. It didn't explain the feeling of a presence, of being watched from the other side of a surface that should be solid. Clara decided to investigate on her own. If the police wouldn't believe her, if Harold thought she was imagining it, then she would prove it herself. She started discreetly, tapping on the walls in different spots, listening to the sound. Most sounded solid, the dull thud of concrete and brick, but some areas sounded different, hollower, as if there was space behind them. She measured her apartment's dimensions and compared them to the building's exterior footprint, and she realized there was a discrepancy. About 2 feet of unaccounted-for space between her apartment and 305. 2 feet was narrow, but it was enough for a person to squeeze through, for a person to move between the walls. The discovery sent a chill down her spine. The ASHMONT had hidden spaces, passageways between the apartments, and someone or something was using them. Clara needed to see with her own eyes. She needed to confirm it. The next day, Clara ran into Mr. Peterson in the elevator. She had seen him a few times, always with a newspaper, always smelling of cigarettes, always with the expression of someone carrying heavy secrets. "Miss Vance," he greeted her. "How's the apartment? Settling in all right?" Clara hesitated. Something in the way he asked, not casual but loaded with meaning, made her think he might know something. "Actually, not so well," she admitted. "I've been hearing strange things. At night, in the walls." Peterson looked at her more closely. The elevator began its descent, the cable making its familiar metallic groan. "What kind of things?" "Footsteps, voices, Like someone is walking inside the walls, Clara explained, watching his reaction. Peterson didn't seem surprised. He just nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he already suspected. You too, then? Two? Clara repeated. You hear them? Peterson lowered his voice, glancing quickly at the floor indicator. Everyone hears them, miss, but nobody talks about it. We've learned not to. Why? The elevator stopped on the second floor, but Peterson held the door open. Because bad things happen to people who ask too many questions. Did you ever meet Catherine? From 408? No. Who is she? Clara asked. Was. Peterson corrected, his voice heavy. She lived here for 3 years, started hearing the same sounds you are. She got obsessed, said someone was living in the walls, that the building had secrets. She filed complaints, threatened to sue. And what happened? Peterson looked down the empty hallway, making sure they were alone. She disappeared. 6 months ago, Harold said she moved out suddenly, in the middle of the night. But I heard something that night. Screams, coming from her apartment. And then, silence. The next morning, the apartment was empty. Too clean, like someone had erased any evidence she was ever there. Clara's mouth went dry. Did you go to the police? I did. They investigated, found nothing. No body, no crime. And Harold had paperwork showing Catherine had terminated her lease, even had her signature. The police filed it as an adult who chose to leave without notice. Peterson explained, letting go of the door. But I know what I heard, and I know she wasn't the first. What do you mean? The ASHMONT's been around since the 60s, Peterson continued. And ever since, people disappear. Not many. One every few years. Always people who are alone. No close family. People nobody would miss too much. And always the same story. They moved out suddenly, no goodbyes. Clara felt a cold dread creep up her spine. And you think, what? That someone is killing residents? Peterson shrugged, but the gesture wasn't casual. I don't know what's happening, but I know this building has secrets. It has spaces that shouldn't exist. And someone, or several someones, is using those spaces. How do you know about the spaces? Clara asked. Because I've seen them, Peterson said simply. 5 years ago, I had a leak in my apartment. Harold came to fix it. Had to open up the wall. And I saw behind it. It wasn't just insulation and pipes. There was a corridor. Narrow, but definitely a corridor. Harold covered it up fast. Said it was part of the original ventilation system from when the building was used as a fallout shelter. But the way he covered it, the hurry, he didn't want me to see. Clara processed the information. A fallout shelter. That would explain the hidden spaces, but it wouldn't explain why someone was still using them, nor why people were disappearing. Do you have any proof? She asked. Photos? Documents? I did, Peterson said, his voice low. I took pictures that day, but my apartment was broken into 2 weeks later. They only took my laptop and my phone, nothing else. Not the TV, not the cash I had stashed, just the devices where the photos were stored. Harold? Clara ventured. I don't know. Could be him. Could be someone else. What I know is that after that I stopped asking questions. I stopped investigating, because I realized that whoever is behind this, they know when someone is getting too close to the truth. The elevator began to beep a warning. It had been held too long. Peterson let the door go. One last piece of advice, Miss Vance, he said before stepping out. If you value your life, stop digging. Accept the noises. Ignore them. And when your lease is up, leave. Don't renew. Don't ask questions. Just get out. The elevator doors closed, leaving Clara alone with her thoughts and a growing fear in her chest. She wasn't going to stop digging. She couldn't, because now she knew. Catherine was real. The disappearances were real. And if she didn't find out what was happening, she could be next. That afternoon, Clara did a deep dive, not just on the ASHMONT, but on missing persons connected to the address. She used public records, online forums, and digitized newspaper archives, and she found them, more than she expected. 1998, Sandra Morales, 34, accountant, last seen at the ASHMONT Building, declared a missing person. Case went cold after 6 months. 2003, David Carter, 41, truck driver, disappeared after moving into the ASHMONT. Family lost contact, never found. 2011, Rebecca Foster, 28, nurse. Last known correspondence mentioned strange things in her apartment building. Disappeared 3 weeks later. 2019, Jennifer Oakes, 39, teacher, no close family, vanished from the ASHMONT. Case closed as an adult who chose to disappear. and Catherine Price, 35, graphic designer, missing for 6 months, 5 people, over more than 2 decades, all with something in common. They lived alone, had few social ties, and disappeared from the ASHMONT Building without a trace. Clara printed everything, organized it in a folder, evidence, a pattern, something the police couldn't ignore. But then she noticed something more disturbing. All the disappearance dates had something in common. They all occurred on the night of a new moon, when the darkness was most complete. The next new moon was in 4 days. Clara's stomach twisted. If the pattern held, if whoever was doing this followed the same schedule, then someone else could disappear. Soon. Or worse, she could be the one they chose. She had to act. Now. She didn't have time to convince the police, to gather more evidence. She had 4 days to find out what was happening in the walls of the ASHMONT. And that night, she made a decision. She was going to find the corridors. She was going to enter them. She was going to see for herself what was hidden, even if it meant putting herself in mortal danger. Clara waited until 2 a.m., the time when the sounds were most active. She dressed in dark clothes, grabbed her fully charged phone, a flashlight, and the sharpest knife from the kitchen. It wasn't much, but it was what she had. She slipped out of her apartment and went to 305. She had checked the records. The apartment had been officially vacant for 8 months. No one had moved in, but Clara was sure that's where the sounds were coming from. The door was locked, of course, but Clara had learned something useful in recent days: how to pick old locks with bobby pins. YouTube was educational in unexpected ways. It took 10 minutes, her fingers trembling, sweat trickling down her back, but finally the lock gave. The door swung open with a low groan. The apartment was plunged into darkness. Clara switched on her phone's flashlight, sweeping it across the space. Empty, completely empty. Dust covered the floor. A few old boxes were stacked in a corner, but there was no furniture, no sign of life. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She went straight to the bedroom, the room that shared a wall with hers, and there, she began to search. She tapped the walls methodically, listening. Solid, 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 hollow. She'd found it. Clara examined the wall more closely. The paint was newer in this section, the texture slightly different, as if it had been recently repaired. She ran her fingers over the surface and felt it, a thin line, a seam. Using her knife, she began to scrape away the paint, layer after layer, revealing what was underneath. Plaster, new, applied over something older. Clara worked carefully but quickly. She made a small hole, then a larger one. The wall was thinner than it looked, not solid concrete, but a temporary barrier, built to hide something. Finally, she made an opening large enough to look through. On the other side was a corridor, narrow, maybe 20 inches wide, but definitely a corridor. The walls were exposed concrete, the floor covered with old cardboard and scraps of carpet, and there were things. A flashlight hanging from a hook, empty water bottles, a dirty blanket folded in a corner. Someone had been here. Recently. Clara pointed her phone through the opening, taking pictures. Evidence. Finally, undeniable evidence. And then she heard it. Footsteps. Not inside the secret corridor. In the apartment. Behind her. She spun around. A figure was standing in the bedroom doorway, illuminated only by the faint light from the exterior hallway. It was hard to make out any features, but Clara could see. It was a man. Thin, wearing dark clothes. Not Harold. Someone else. "You shouldn't be here," the figure said, his voice raspy, as if it wasn't used often. Clara tightened her grip on the knife. "Who are you?" The figure didn't answer. He just started walking toward her, slowly, unhurriedly. Clara backed away, but she was cornered. The only way out was through the door where the figure stood. She glanced at the hole in the wall, the opening to the secret corridor. It was narrow, but maybe. She made the decision in a fraction of a second. She turned and threw herself through the hole, the rough concrete scraping her arms and shoulders. She landed on the other side, in the hidden passageway, and started to run. Behind her, she heard the figure shout, then the sound of someone forcing their way through the hole. Clara ran blindly, her phone's flashlight illuminating the narrow path ahead. The corridor stretched on, twisting, forking. She chose directions at random, just wanting to get away. She passed openings that looked into other apartments, small cracks, windows into lives that didn't know they were being watched. She saw furniture through them, TVs turned on, people sleeping. The corridor sloped downward, A narrow, steep metal staircase. Clara scrambled down, nearly falling, adrenaline the only thing keeping her moving. At the bottom, the corridor opened into a larger chamber. Clara stopped, breathing heavily, trying to get her bearings. The chamber was circular, maybe 12 feet in diameter, and the walls were covered with things. Photos, dozens of them, taped, tacked, some just propped up. Photos of people, sleeping, eating, living their lives, all taken from strange angles, as if observed through cracks in the walls. Clara recognized some of the faces. Residents of the ASHMONT, Mrs. Kim, the couple from 405, Mr. Brenner, Mr. Peterson, and herself. There were at least 20 photos of Clara, sleeping, working on her laptop, showering, the camera aimed through an opening in the bathroom ceiling she had never noticed. Clara felt bile rise in her throat. How long had she been watched? Since she moved in? Before? And then she saw something worse. On a separate wall were different photos, people she didn't recognize. But under each photo, a date and a word. Sandra, 1998. Complete David, 2003. Complete Rebecca, 2011. Complete Jennifer, 2019. Complete Catherine, 2024, in progress. And at the end, a recent photo of Clara. No date, no word, just her picture, as if waiting to be added to the collection. Clara backed away, trembling. She had to get out. She had to get out now. She looked for another exit. There were 3 corridors leading out of the chamber. She chose the one on the right and started running again. But then she heard them. Voices, multiple voices, coming from up ahead, not distant whispers, clear conversation. Clara slowed her pace, approaching cautiously. The corridor opened into another, even larger chamber, and it was lit, real light, old bulbs hanging from the ceiling, and people. Clara hid in the shadows, watching. There were at least 5 people in the chamber, all wearing dark, dirty clothes. Some were eating from cans. Others just sat, staring at nothing, and they all had the same look, pale, thin, with sunken eyes, as if they hadn't seen the sun in a very long time. A woman turned, and Clara saw her face clearly. Her heart stopped. It was Jennifer Oakes, missing since 2019. But she wasn't dead. She was here, alive, living in the tunnels beneath the ASHMONT. Clara wanted to scream, to run to her, to ask what was happening. But then she saw someone else enter the chamber. And this time she recognized him immediately. Harold. He was carrying a box of supplies, food, water, blankets. The people in the chamber approached him like starving children, taking what he offered. And Harold smiled. That polite, empty smile Clara had seen so many times. "How are we all today?" he asked, his voice echoing. "Everyone behaving? Everyone accepting their place?" The people nodded. Submissive, broken. "Good," Harold continued, "because today we have a new candidate. She's still resisting, but they all resist at first. In time, she'll understand, just like all of you understood, that the world up there has no place for people like us. Lonely people, forgotten people. But here we have purpose. Here we have a family." One of the people, an older man, spoke, his voice weak. "What about Catherine?" Harold sighed. "Catherine didn't accept it. She fought too hard. I had to deal with her permanently. She's with the others now, the ones who couldn't be saved." Clara felt the horror solidify in her chest. Catherine was dead, and the others, how many more? She had to get out. She had to call the police. She had to. Her phone vibrated. In the chamber, every head snapped in her direction. Harold looked directly at where Clara was hiding, and he smiled. "Miss Vance," he said calmly, "so glad you could join us. Please, come out. There's no point in running. You're in my labyrinth now, and I know every inch of it." Clara ran. She chose the 3rd corridor, the one she hadn't explored. She heard footsteps behind her, not just Harold, but others. He had sent his residents after her. The corridor led up. Clara followed, her legs burning, her lungs on fire. There had to be an exit. There had to be. She saw it ahead, a vertical ladder, leading up, to where she didn't know, but it was up, toward the surface. She began to climb the metal rungs. 10 feet, 15, 20. Her arm muscles screamed, but she kept going. And then she saw it. Light, daylight, filtering through a grate at the top, a ventilation duct leading outside. Clara reached the grate and pushed. It didn't budge, bolted shut. She used her knife, prying at the corners, trying to loosen the screws. One gave, then another. Below, she heard Harold shouting, "Get her! Don't let her escape!" Clara pushed with all her might. The grate finally came loose, clattering as it fell. She pulled herself up through the opening and emerged into an alley. Behind the ASHMONT, daylight hit her face, fresh air filled her lungs. Freedom. Clara ran. She didn't look back. She ran to the main street until she found people, traffic, normalcy. And then, trembling, bloodied, and utterly exhausted, she dialed 911. This time she had more than whispers and pictures of her refrigerator. She had been there. She had seen Jennifer alive. She had heard Harold confess to murder. This time they would have to believe her. The police arrived in force. 4 squad cars, then 6. Clara told them everything, every detail, every second. She showed them the photos on her phone, showed them the scrapes on her arms from squeezing through the narrow corridors. She showed them the way, through apartment 305, through the hole in the wall. A Lieutenant, Morrison, led the operation. He listened to Clara with growing attention, especially when she mentioned Jennifer Oakes and the other people living in the tunnels. "If what you're saying is true," he said, "we have a hostage situation, possibly multiple homicides. We're going in with a tactical team." They swarmed the building. Clara stayed outside with paramedics who insisted on checking her injuries. She watched as officers entered, guns drawn, flashlights cutting through the gloom of the ASHMONT's interior. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, Morrison came out. His expression made Clara's heart sink. "We found the tunnels," he said. "Exactly where you described. The system is extensive. Corridors, chambers, even some areas that look like they were used as temporary living quarters." "And the people?" Clara asked. "Jennifer? The others?" Morrison shook his head. "No one. The tunnels are empty. We found evidence of recent occupation, food, blankets, trash, but no people." "That's impossible," Clara insisted. "I saw them. I was there 3 hours ago." "I believe you saw something," Morrison said. "But whoever was there, they're gone. There must be other exits we don't know about. The system connects to old sewer lines, maintenance tunnels. They could have gone anywhere." "And Harold?" "He's gone too. We checked the super's apartment in the basement. Empty. Looks like it was abandoned in a hurry. Open drawers, clothes left behind, but no sign of him." Clara felt the floor drop out from under her. "And the chamber, with the photos? Did you see it?" "We saw it," Morrison confirmed. "That's solid evidence. We're going to process everything, look for fingerprints, DNA. We'll issue a warrant for Harold Brennan's arrest, and we're going to investigate every disappearance you documented." He paused. "But Miss Vance, I have to be honest. Without victims, without bodies, without a suspect, this is going to be a long and complicated investigation." "But you believe me now," Clara said. "It wasn't just me being crazy." "I never thought it was," Morrison replied. "And I'm sorry we didn't take your concerns more seriously sooner. You were brave, and you probably saved your own life by getting out when you did." Clara was taken to the hospital for proper treatment. Her cuts were cleaned and bandaged. They gave her a mild sedative for the shock. And then finally they called her sister. Diane arrived within an hour, pale and terrified. She hugged Clara for a long time without saying anything, and when they finally separated, there were tears in her eyes. "You're coming home," Diane said firmly. "My home. You are never going back to that place." Clara didn't argue. The thought of returning to the ASHMONT, even to get her things, made her stomach turn. In the days that followed, the investigation continued. The police found more, much more, than they expected. The tunnels didn't just run under the ASHMONT. They connected to other nearby buildings, an underground labyrinth no one had ever fully mapped. They found the chamber with the photos. They processed every one. They identified victims beyond the ones Clara had discovered. The number grew from 5 to 8 to 12, and then they found the bodies in a sealed-off section of the tunnels, behind a concrete wall that had to be demolished. They discovered human remains, 5 sets, in varying states of decomposition. The oldest, according to the medical examiners, was at least 25 years old. Catherine Price was identified among them, dead for less than 2 months. The media exploded. House of Horrors discovered in apartment building. Superintendent suspected of multiple murders. Labyrinth of death beneath apartments. The ASHMONT was evacuated. All residents were temporarily relocated while the investigation continued. And Clara became, unintentionally, the center of the story. Reporters camped outside the hospital. They wanted interviews. They wanted details. They wanted her story. Clara refused them all. Because even with the validation, even with the proof that she wasn't crazy, she felt no victory. She felt only a cold emptiness. And a question that wouldn't let her sleep. Jennifer and the others who were alive in the tunnels. Where were they now? Had Harold taken them? Were they hiding somewhere else? Or had they been disposed of? The police assured her they would keep looking, but Clara knew the truth. Somewhere, in tunnels no one had mapped, under streets people walked on every day, Harold was still out there, with his victims, waiting. And one day, when the attention faded, when the cameras went away, when everyone forgot, he would be back, or he would find a new place, a new building, new victims, because people like Harold never stopped. They just changed their hunting grounds. 3 weeks later, Clara was still living with Diane. She slept on the couch in the small studio apartment, surrounded by her sister's things, by life and normalcy, but she couldn't sleep properly. Every night she'd wake up sweating, heart pounding, hearing whispers that weren't there. Therapy started in the second week. Dr. Patricia Reeves, a trauma specialist. Twice weekly sessions where Clara recounted, processed, tried to understand. "You survived," Dr. Reeves often said. "That's what matters. You got out. You're alive." But Clara didn't feel alive. She felt watched. Even in Diane's apartment, even surrounded by neighbors and city noise, she felt invisible eyes on her. As if Harold had left a mark on her, as if he were still watching. The police kept in touch. Morrison called weekly with updates. Harold Brennan was still missing. Warrants were out. Airports, borders, all monitored. But no sign of him, and no sign of the others either. Jennifer, the tunnel residents, all vanished like smoke. "It's like they never existed," Morrison said on one call. And the worst part is, legally, some of them never did. Jennifer Oakes, for example. Her family had her declared legally dead years ago. Officially, she was already dead. How do you bring back someone who's dead on paper? Clara had no answer. The ASHMONT remained closed. The investigation was complete, but the owner, some shadowy investment firm, had abandoned the building. Unpaid taxes, pending lawsuits. The place was in legal limbo. And then, a month and a half after everything, Clara received a package. It arrived by mail, addressed to her at Diane's apartment. No return address. Just her name and address in a handwriting she recognized immediately. Harold's handwriting. Diane was at work. Clara was alone. She stared at the package for 5 minutes before she had the courage to open it. Inside was an envelope. And inside the envelope, a photo and a note. The photo was of Clara, taken recently, very recently. She recognized it. It had been taken 3 days ago when she'd gone out for coffee. She was on the street looking in a shop window. Someone had followed her. Someone had taken that picture. The note read, "Dear Miss Vance, I do hope you are well. I imagine it has been a difficult adjustment after our last conversation. I want you to know that I hold no grudges. You did what you thought was right, but I'm afraid you have caused unnecessary trouble. My family had to move, find a new home. It was uncomfortable for everyone, especially the more fragile members. Jennifer sends her regards, by the way. She is adapting to the new place. They all are. As for you, I know you tried to expose me, tried to destroy what I built, but you must understand, I am not the villain of this story. I am a savior. These people had nothing. No one. I gave them purpose. A family. They thank me, you know. Even the ones who resisted at first. You could have been part of it. You could have found peace. But you chose the world out there. That cold, indifferent world that will forget you the moment you are no longer useful. So go, live your life, but know that I will always be watching. I will always be close. Because, Clara, you are special. You saw me. You understood me, even if you won't admit it. And one day, when you are too tired of fighting, when the loneliness is too great, the walls will call you back. And this time, you will answer. Fondly, HBPS. Your sister is lovely. Diane, is it? She seems happy. It would be a shame if something happened to change that. Clara dropped the paper, her hands trembling violently. He knew where she was. He knew about Diane. And the threat was clear. She called Morrison immediately. He came in person, collecting the letter and photo as evidence. He put a police detail on Diane's house. He intensified the search for Harold, but they all knew the truth. Harold was a ghost. He had lived in the shadows for decades. He knew how to disappear, how to watch without being seen. And now, he was playing with Clara, a cat with a mouse, letting her know he could reach her whenever he wanted. The paranoia returned, worse this time. Clara saw Harold and every middle-aged man on the street. She heard footsteps where there were none. She felt invisible eyes following her. Diane tried to help. She suggested Clara stay with her indefinitely, that she didn't need to rush to find a new place. But Clara knew she couldn't. She couldn't put Diane in danger. 2 weeks after the letter, Clara found a new apartment, the 12th floor of a modern glass and steel building. 24-hour security, cameras on every floor, recent construction, no tunnels, no history, no secrets. It was expensive, absurdly expensive, but Clara didn't care. She used all her savings, took out a loan, anything to feel safe. She moved in on a sunny Saturday. Diane helped. A few friends from work, too. The apartment was small but modern, with clean white walls and huge windows that let in abundant light. No dark corners, no hidden spaces, no whispering walls. Clara installed her own security cameras, 3 of them covering every angle. She checked the locks. She spoke with the building's security guard, showed him a picture of Harold, and asked to be notified if anyone matching the description was seen. She did everything right, every precaution, and for a few weeks it worked. Clara started to sleep better. She started to feel human again. The therapy helped, the work helped, the routine helped. Maybe, she thought, maybe Harold was just trying to scare her. Maybe he wouldn't really come. Maybe he'd lost interest. But then, 3 weeks after she moved in, Clara woke up in the middle of the night. There was no sound, no whisper, no scratching, just a visceral certainty that something was wrong. She sat up in bed, heart racing, and looked around. The apartment was silent. Streetlight filtered through the curtains. Everything was normal. But then she saw it, the wall beside her bed. There was a crack, small, thin. It hadn't been there before. She was sure of it. Clara got up slowly and approached it. The crack was fresh. The paint around it was still dusty, as if it had just been made. And through the crack, coming from the other side, she felt it, a draft of air, cold, damp, impossible. Because there was no other side. On the other side of that wall should be the building's hallway. Solid concrete, not an empty space. Clara pressed her ear to the crack, against every instinct for self-preservation. And she heard it, breathing, slow, calm. Someone was on the other side. She backed away, trembling. She grabbed her phone, called building security. "I need someone to come up here now," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Apartment 1204. I think there's someone in the walls." A security guard arrived in 5 minutes. Young, professional, taking her complaint seriously. He examined the wall, the crack. He knocked on it with his knuckles. "Sounds solid," he said. "Concrete, no empty space. It could have just been the building settling. New buildings sometimes get small cracks in the first few years." "But I heard something," Clara insisted, breathing, from the other side. The guard looked at her with professional concern mixed with something else. Pity. He knew her story. Everyone in the building knew. The woman who had escaped the horror building, the traumatized victim. "I'll file a report," he said gently, "and I'll make sure the patrols check this floor more often tonight. But Miss Vance, honestly, I think it would be good for you to talk to someone, a professional. This kind of paranoia after what you've been through, it's normal, but it needs to be managed." Clara thanked him, and he left. She stood alone, staring at the crack. She wasn't imagining it. She knew she wasn't, but how could she prove it? Clara didn't sleep for the rest of the night. She sat in the living room, facing the bedroom, watching the wall with the crack. And then, as the sun began to rise, she did something Dr. Reeves would definitely not approve of. She went to the hardware store and bought a hammer and a wide putty knife. She returned to the apartment, went straight to the bedroom, and started hammering the wall around the crack. If there was a space there, she was going to find it, even if everyone thought she was crazy. The first layer was drywall, easy to break. Clara worked methodically, creating a fist-sized hole, then larger. Her hands ached, dust covered everything, but she kept going. And then she saw it. Behind the drywall, instead of insulation and another layer of concrete as there should have been, there was a space. Small, maybe 6 inches deep, but definitely a space. And in that space, there was something. Clara stopped, her heart tight in her chest. With a trembling hand, she used her phone's flashlight to illuminate it. It was a device, small, black, with a lens, a camera, hidden in the wall, pointed directly at where her bed was. Clara recoiled, nausea rising. Someone had installed it, but when? The apartment was new. She had been one of the first tenants, unless it had been installed during construction, or afterward, before she moved in. She examined the rest of the apartment with a new purpose. She checked every wall, every corner, and she found more. 2 cameras in the bathroom, 1 in the living room, all hidden, all pointed at her private spaces. Someone had prepared the apartment. Someone knew she would be moving here, and they had prepared it in advance. Harold. Clara called Morrison immediately. He sent a technical team. They removed the cameras, analyzed them. They were professional devices, broadcasting to a remote receiver via Wi-Fi. Impossible to trace back to the source without specialized equipment, but it confirmed what Clara already knew. She had never escaped. Harold had always been watching, always one step ahead. How did he get access? Clara asked Morrison. This building has security. It has cameras. How did he get in? Morrison shook his head, frustrated. We're investigating. But Clara, I need you to consider the possibility that Harold has help, that he's not alone in this. Someone with access to construction, to security systems. This requires more than one person. Clara felt the floor disappear. More than one person. A network. An organization. How many were there? And where else were they operating? Diane insisted Clara come back to stay with her, but Clara refused. She wouldn't put her sister in more danger. Instead, Morrison arranged a safe house, a temporary apartment used by the police to protect witnesses. Undisclosed location, 24-hour police guard. Everything monitored. Clara moved with just a single bag of clothes. She left everything behind, furniture, personal belongings, everything. She just wanted to be away. The safe house was Spartan, functional, devoid of personality, but it was safe, or it was supposed to be. Clara spent the first few days obsessively checking, looking behind every piece of furniture, tapping every wall, searching for hidden cameras. She found nothing. The place was clean, but she couldn't relax, because she knew if Harold could get into the modern building with all its security, then no place was truly safe. And then, 1 week into her stay at the safe house, it happened. Clara was sleeping when she heard the sound, faint but unmistakable. The sound of nails scratching, coming from the wall. She sat bolt upright, heart pounding. No, not again. Not here. The scratching continued, methodical, deliberate, as if someone were digging through the wall inch by inch. Clara got up, went to the door, and called for the officer on guard. Are you hearing that? She asked, pointing at the wall. The officer came in, listening intently. I don't hear anything, Miss Vance. How can you not hear it? It's right there, Clara insisted, but even as she spoke, the sound stopped. The officer checked the wall. Solid, no damage, no evidence of any tampering. Clara, he said gently. It was Rodriguez, one of the more sympathetic officers. You need to get some rest. I know you're under a lot of stress, but I promise this place is secure. Nobody gets in or out without our knowledge. But as he spoke, Clara saw something that made her blood run cold. On the wall behind him, just above the baseboard, something was written. Small, almost imperceptible, as if traced with a finger in the dust. 3 words. I am here. Clara pointed, trembling. Rodriguez turned, saw it. His expression changed instantly. Stay here, he ordered, drawing his weapon. He called for backup on his radio. Within 2 minutes, 4 officers were in the apartment, checking every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Nothing. No one. But the message was there. Physical proof that someone had been here. Recently. How? Morrison asked when he arrived, staring at the message. This place is a fortress. It's under constant surveillance. How did someone get in? No one had an answer. Clara realized then. It didn't matter where she ran. It didn't matter how many locks she installed, how many cameras she put up, how much police protection she had. Harold didn't play by normal rules. He was patient. He had resources. And he had something more important, an obsession. He wasn't going to stop. Ever. Not until he had her back in the walls, or until one of them was dead. Clara made a decision. A decision that Morrison and Diane and Dr. Reeves would all disapprove of, but it was the only one that made sense. She was going to stop running. She was going back to the ASHMONT, and she was going to end this, once and for all. Clara planned carefully. She didn't tell anyone, not Morrison, not Diane, not the officers protecting her, because if she told them, they would try to stop her. They would say it was dangerous, that it was suicide, and maybe it was. But living in constant paranoia, always looking over her shoulder, never knowing when Harold would strike. That wasn't a life. It was just a different kind of prison. So one night, when the officer on guard was on a break, Clara slipped out the bathroom window. She had prepared for it, a makeshift rope made of bed sheets, just like in the movies. She lowered herself 2 floors to the alley, dropped the last few feet, and vanished into the night. She took a cab to the ASHMONT. The building was dark, surrounded by yellow crime scene tape, condemned, awaiting a demolition that never came due to legal complications. But Clara knew it wasn't empty. She knew Harold was there, waiting, always waiting. She entered through a side door, the same one she had escaped from weeks ago. The lock was broken, vandalized by the homeless or the curious. The inside was as she remembered, only worse. Dark, the smell of mold and decay. Clara switched on her phone's flashlight, walking through the familiar hallways. She went up to the 3rd floor. She stopped in front of the door to 304, her old apartment. The door was ajar. She stepped inside. The apartment was exactly as she had left it. Her furniture, her things, all abandoned in her haste to leave. But it was different. It was waiting. Clara went to the bedroom, to the wall where she had heard the first whispers, and there, large as life, was an opening. Not a makeshift hole like the one she'd made in 305, but a real door. Hidden, disguised, but a door. Someone had opened it, left it exposed. An invitation. Clara took a deep breath. She checked her phone. She had automatic recording on, uploading to the cloud in real time. If something happened, there would be a record. And then she stepped through. The corridor was familiar, but different at night, with only her flashlight cutting through the darkness. She followed the path she remembered, down, always down, toward the deep chambers. And then she heard it, a voice, a single voice, echoing through the narrow passages. Harold's voice. "Welcome back, Miss Vance," he said, as if he were talking on the phone. Casual. "I knew you'd come, eventually, because you understand now, don't you? That there is no escape, that the walls always call you back." Clara followed the voice. She passed the chamber with the photos, now empty, the walls scrubbed clean, the evidence removed by the police. She went deeper, and finally, she reached the large chamber, the one where she had seen Jennifer and the others. Harold was there, alone, sitting in a chair in the center, lit by a single lantern, as if he were waiting in a living room, not in an underground tunnel. He smiled when he saw her, that polite, empty smile. "You came unarmed," he observed. "That shows either confidence or desperation." Clara stopped a few feet away. "Where are they? Jennifer and the others?" "Safe," Harold answered. "In a new home, a place you will never find. I've learned from my mistakes, you see. You taught me to be more careful." "You're a monster," Clara said, her voice steady. "I'm a savior," Harold corrected, his voice filled with genuine fervor. "Those people had nothing, no one. Society threw them away. I gave them purpose. You locked them up like animals." "You killed some of them," Clara accused. "Only the ones who couldn't be saved," Harold said, as if it were obvious. "The ones who fought too hard, the ones who wouldn't accept the gift I offered. But you, Clara, you're different. You understand loneliness. You understand rejection. Marcus taught you that well, didn't he?" Clara felt anger surge. "Don't talk about him." "Why not? He shaped you, broke you, and then he left you for me to find." "In a way, he did my work for me," Harold explained, standing up. "You were perfect when you arrived at the ASHMONT. Vulnerable, isolated, doubting your own sanity. All you needed was a final push. You failed," Clara said firmly. "I escaped." "No," Harold corrected, taking a step toward her. "You ran, but running isn't escaping. Running is just delaying the inevitable. And now you're back, of your own free will, because you finally understand the world out there has no place for you. But here, in the walls, you belong." "I don't belong anywhere you control," Clara said, backing away as he advanced. "Still resisting," Harold observed, almost proudly. "That's good. Resistance makes the acceptance all the more meaningful. Jennifer resisted for 3 months before she finally understood. How long will you take, Clara?" "I'm not here to be your prisoner," Clara said. "I'm here to end this." Harold stopped, tilting his head. "End it how? Are you going to kill me? Did you bring a weapon I'm not seeing?" "I don't need a weapon," Clara said. "I've already ended it. You just haven't realized it yet." Harold frowned, genuinely confused, and then he understood. His eyes widened. "Your phone," he said. "You're recording." Clara smiled. "Not just recording, broadcasting, live, to the police. They know where I am, and they're hearing every word you say, every confession. As if summoned, lights appeared in the tunnel openings. Flashlights, dozens of them, and voices shouting, "Police! Harold Brennan, you're surrounded!" Harold looked around, realizing the trap, and then he looked back at Clara, and something in his expression shifted. The mask of politeness fell away. What remained was pure rage. "You didn't have to do this," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I offered you peace, a family, and you chose to destroy it." "I chose freedom," Clara corrected. Harold moved fast, faster than a man his age should have been able to. He grabbed Clara by the arm, yanking her close. She felt something cold against her neck, a blade. "Back off!" Harold screamed at the officers now entering the chamber. "Back off or I'll cut her throat!" The officers stopped, their guns aimed but without a clear shot. Morrison was among them, his face tense. "Harold," he said calmly, "don't make this worse. Let her go." "Worse?" Harold repeated, laughing humorlessly. "You think it can get worse? You destroyed everything. My family, my purpose. What do I have left?" "Your life," Morrison argued. "Let her go, surrender, and you live. Live in a prison, judged by people who don't understand? I'd rather die," Harold said. Clara felt the blade press harder. She knew she had seconds. She had to do something. She remembered what Dr. Reeves had said in therapy, about not being a victim, about taking back her power, and she made her move. With all her strength, she stomped on Harold's foot and threw her elbow backward, hitting him in the stomach. The blade sliced her neck, but not deeply. It was enough to make Harold loosen his grip for a second. It was all the snipers needed. 2 shots. Precise. Harold fell, still clutching the knife, his eyes wide with surprise. Clara stumbled forward, her hands at her neck, feeling warm blood, but not too much. Just a shallow cut. Paramedics rushed to her. Morrison, too. Other officers surrounded Harold, kicking the knife away, checking for a pulse. "He's alive," one of them said. "Wounded, but alive." "Good," Morrison said. "I want him to stand trial. I want everyone to hear what he did." Clara was led outside to the waiting ambulance. They treated the cut. It needed 8 stitches, but it wasn't serious. As the paramedic worked, she saw him, Harold, being carried out on a stretcher, handcuffed, wounded but conscious. His eyes met hers, and even now, even defeated, he smiled, that empty smile, and he murmured something only Clara could hear. "The walls remember." Then he was gone, and Clara finally breathed. 6 months later, Harold Brennan's trial was a national spectacle. Weeks of testimony, evidence upon evidence, 5 bodies recovered, but none of the living captives were ever found. Jennifer and the others remained missing, presumably hidden in some other location that Harold refused to reveal. He was convicted on 5 counts of murder, multiple charges of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and invasion of privacy. Sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Clara testified. She told her story before the court, the cameras, the world. It was painful, exposing, but necessary. And when it was over, something shifted inside her. Not healing. That would take years, maybe a lifetime, but something like closure. Clara found a new apartment, this time in a different city, far from the memories, far from the ASHMONT. A simple but bright place where the walls were thin and you could hear neighbors living normal lives. Diane visited monthly. The therapy continued, helping Clara to process, to rebuild. She went back to work, kept up with friends, started going out again. Slowly, life returned. Not the same life, but a new one. Scarred, but alive. But some nights, when the apartment was too quiet, when she was alone and the world seemed distant, Clara would hear things. Small things that were probably just her imagination, but that made her heart race. A whisper, a scratch, footsteps that stopped when she paid attention. And she would check the walls, look for cracks, look behind the furniture, and she would find nothing. She never found anything. But the doubt remained, planted deep, impossible to ever fully uproot. Because Harold had been right about one thing. The walls remember. And once you've spent enough time in them, once they've learned your scent, your voice, your fears, a part of you always stays there, in the shadows, in the empty spaces, in the silence between one heartbeat and the next, waiting, always waiting. Clara carries that certainty with her, not as paralysis, but as vigilance. A reminder that she survived, that she fought, that she won, but also a reminder that the world has dark places, hidden spaces, people who live in the cracks of society, watching, waiting for their chance, and that even in modern buildings, even with all the security, even with every precaution, sometimes, just sometimes, the walls whisper back,